The sky was the color of rusted iron, a permanent dusk draped across the horizon. The year was unnamed, but no one needed a calendar to know that time no longer moved forward. It only circled back into itself, like a tired chant murmured by the dying. Within the hushed corridors of the Ministry of Workers' Harmony, a man named Bray sat hunched before a crude screen, its greenish glow casting an acidic light across his furrowed face. He was a number. All workers were. His designation, Worker Bray, was one of the few remaining liberties he clung to, even though it was no liberty at all. Outside, the walls of the city were plastered with the banner of the Federated Syndical Assembly, the governing structure that had replaced the old republics. On every wall, the same image, a blackened fist gripping a broken chain, crowned by the words, "Through labor, we rise." They were the remnant slogans from the Unification War, back when the anointed collectives had overthrown the parliamentary state. Bray remembered none of it personally, only the stories his grandfather used to whisper in the shadows of the underground ration lines. The collectives had begun as whispers in print shops, ghost-like gatherings in basements, words passed in smoke-filled rooms. They called it syndicalism, a pure form of worker control. In its infancy, it promised freedom from wage slavery, from the gold-tongued tyrants of the Market Bureau. The old wage system, with its gilded lies and invisible chains, was burned at the root. Or so they said. Syndicalism, the creed proclaimed, would liberate the body and spirit both. The means of production would be controlled by those who labored. The very breath of the earth would belong to its stewards. No more landlords, no more bosses, no more copper-throated overseers. At first, there was joy in the streets. Bray's mother had danced barefoot on the pavestones the night the Labour Parliament dissolved itself and the banks were nationalised. But behind that jubilation, another force took shape, grey-cloaked and silent. The Assembly did not come to power all at once. It rose like smoke, through committees and councils, through votes taken without ballots, through whispers that became rules. The Banking Bureau was the first to fall under total control, then the Food Rationing Agency, then the Transport Guilds. Each time, the phrase repeated itself, in the interest of collective stability. Bray had once studied these things. In the restricted halls of the People's Learning Institute, they had taught him the old debates. They told of the Labourist split, when the Social Democratic League had fractured over the question of central planning. The left faction, known in forbidden texts as the Marxian wing, had denounced parliamentary socialism as compromise. The anarcho-syndicalists opposed them not in aim, but in method. They believed power should be fractured endlessly, that workers' councils should federate but never merge. The collectivists disagreed. They believed unity was strength, and strength demanded order. Bray had found an old file once, hidden inside a disused conveyor station near the South Grain silos. It was brittle and yellowed, marked ILP, obsolete, and filled with language that stirred something deep within his chest. There were 8 policies, like relics etched in sacred stone: a living wage, nationalization of banking, bulk food purchases, national transport, and so on. But the phrases that caught him were not the policies themselves, but the names: Brailsford, Hobson, Wise. Who were they? Their names were spoken nowhere in the Citadel's archives. Their existence was denied by the Ministry of Truthful Workings. And yet, their words burned with unpermitted passion. The file spoke of things he had never known: wages paid in dignity, not scrip; banks held accountable to the public, not the party; a government that served, not ruled. In those forgotten paragraphs, the past breathed. It spoke of the Labourist schism, of Keir the Elder and Maxton the Younger, and the betrayal of the second government. They had tried to serve the workers, not manage them. They had sought to unify the labouring classes through moral cause, not ideological purity. But the machine did not tolerate divergence. The assembly had crushed them. Now the assembly watched all. The guilds had become arms of the state. The syndicates had merged into monoliths. The cooperative dream had congealed into a tower. Bray knew this, though he said nothing. Speech, like thought, was regulated. His comrade, Lin of Metrics, had once asked aloud whether the daily targets for co-extraction might be inefficient. 2 days later, Lin was reassigned. His new station was never disclosed. The Assembly's youth arm, called the Bright Vanguard, taught schoolchildren that history was an enemy. All that mattered was output, harmony, and the collective mind. They sang the new hymns in sterilized classrooms, songs of the 5-year coal plans, of the heroic harvest, and the martyrs of automation. Bray's own daughter, Nia, had once come home humming a tune about the glorious eradication of class struggle. He had smiled, but inside he felt the old sorrow bloom. The doctrine of the assembly was simple. Class conflict had ended with the revolution. The new conflict was between purity and deviation. All deviation was selfish. All selfishness was capitalist. The worst offense was to doubt the equilibrium. In the eyes of the Bureau of Consensus, to think historically was to resurrect ghosts. But the ghosts persisted. Bray still remembered the forbidden texts he had skimmed behind the cooling ducts. There had been tales of something called the Socialist Sunday Schools, where children once debated morality, not quotas. They had read ethics, not output charts. They had learned about fairness, not productivity schedules. Those schools had died when the assembly outlawed unregulated thought. Even so, fragments endured. The Young Socialist League, absorbed and defanged by the Ministry of Youth Advancement, still bore a trace of its former self. In hidden corners of the city, old syndicalist slogans were scratched into rusting panels: abolish the wage, banking for the people, power to the locals. Bray saw one etched into the side of a grain elevator, half erased: the living wage is life. That night, he dreamed of the old councils, the ones he had never known, yet somehow remembered. A circle of soot-faced workers, heatedly arguing about power, ownership, and distribution. No party official. No central directive. Just people, deciding. When he awoke, a knock echoed against the metallic walls of his compartment. 2 men stood in the hallway, wearing long black coats stamped with the insignia of the Bureau of Labor Preservation. They bore no weapons, no visible threat, but their presence alone was enough to cause Bray's breath to shorten. One of them, a pale man with thin lips and colorless eyes, looked him over with the cold indifference of one inspecting a damaged tool. "You are worker Bray," the man said flatly. "Your presence is required at the local assembly tribunal for a discussion of ideological compliance." Bray's mind flashed. Had he spoken aloud? Had someone reported him? The old file, he had hidden it well, behind a defunct conduit. No one had seen. No one could have seen. "Yes," he said, his voice even. They did not bind him or push him. That was not their way. The assembly's power rested not in violence, but in the weight of certainty. Everyone knew that resistance only led to one destination: reprocessing. And so Bray walked between them, his steps silent on the polished floor. The tribunal chamber was not a courtroom. It had no seats, no audience, no defense. It was a windowless room of white steel, cold and clean, with a single podium set before a large screen. Upon the screen, the face of a woman appeared, wearing the expressionless mask of party dignity. She did not introduce herself. She simply began. "Worker Bray, there have been irregularities in your production files. More importantly, there have been anomalies in your thought patterns as reported by your output logs and social interactions." Bray remained still. You have accessed restricted sectors in the knowledge archive. You have quoted obsolete doctrine in unofficial forums. You have discussed and sanctioned concepts with junior associates. How do you plead? There was no point in pleading. The screen waited. The air in the room thickened. Bray remembered a phrase from the forgotten documents. Liberty is not gifted by governments, but seized by the governed. I believe, he said quietly, that the assembly has forgotten its origins. The screen blinked. The woman's image did not change. Explain. Bray took a breath. The assembly came from the workers. From us. It claimed to speak for our dignity, our labor, our voice. But now it governs through silence. There are no councils. No votes. No real federations. The syndicates were supposed to be autonomous. They were supposed to coordinate, not obey. You refer to an anarcho-syndicalist theory that has been declared inefficient. Bray nodded. Declared inefficient by whom? By the assembly. Who evaluates the evaluators? There was a long pause. Then the woman spoke again, her voice calm and exact. You will be reassigned to Collective Agricultural Zone 7, where your skills in labor optimization will be useful. You will no longer have access to the knowledge archive. All personal permissions are hereby revoked. Bray exhaled. He had expected worse. Reassignment was a slow erasure, not immediate destruction. But he still lived. For now. Outside, the sky had not changed. The rust-red haze still lingered like a bruise. He boarded the transport module in silence, seated among others with blank faces and lowered eyes. None spoke. They were not allowed to. The zone was far from the city, in a region once known for its ancient hills and grain terraces. The farms were mechanized now, rows upon rows of automated tillers and irrigation arms, all directed by a single centralized algorithm. Bray was assigned to oversee efficiency reports. No human hands touched the soil. The people were merely observers of machines. His quarters were small, grey, clean. But they did not scan his dreams. And in his dreams, the old councils returned. So did the voices of Maxton, Brailsford, and Hardy, though he had never heard them in life. They debated, challenged, and reminded him that socialism was never meant to be a pyramid, but a circle. Not command, but cooperation. Not obedience, but participation. One day, while adjusting the fertilizer output ratios, Bray found himself alone by a broken silo, unused for years. Its interior was rusted, overgrown with moss, and half submerged in rainwater. He sat inside it and began to speak softly. He spoke of the old policies. The living wage. The bulk food initiatives. The redistribution of credit. He recited the names not permitted in the city, letting the syllables echo against steel. Hobson. Wise. Morris. Connell. Brailsford. Champion. Connolly. He spoke as though they were present, sitting beside him in the dim silence. And then he did the unthinkable. He began to write. Not on state tablets or sanctioned screens, but with charcoal scraped from the old silo's broken machinery, upon a flattened tin panel. He wrote the 8 policies again, as best he remembered them. Then below them, he added, all power to the federated councils. Let the workers rule themselves. He buried the panel beneath the floorboards of the silo. He did not know if anyone would ever find it. But someone might. Someday. He spent the next seasons in that zone, watched but ignored, productive but never praised. His reports were filed. His quotas met. He remained invisible. But rumors began to spread. Small things. Slogans etched into toolboxes. Quiet conversations in the irrigation tunnels. Questions asked in forbidden dialects. Do you remember the living wage? Was there really a council of workers in Bradford? What is a syndicate without chains? Bray did not answer. He only listened. A courier once passed him a parcel in the mess line. Inside, a single scrap of paper, handwritten, unsigned. It said, "The land belongs to those who till it. The state is not eternal. The circle is not broken." Bray burned the note after reading it, but he remembered every word. As time passed, others were reassigned to Zone 7. A quiet teacher from the metal quarries. A silent baker from the Northern Transit Station. An old textile spinner who claimed to have known someone who once knew someone who heard Maxton speak in the flesh. They worked their shifts. They followed orders. The seasons turned in silent procession. The rust-red haze that hung over the world never lifted, yet in the undercurrents of silence, something stirred. The assembly, distant and all-seeing, continued its broadcasts of unity, its graphs of harvest yields, its victory parades for quotas fulfilled. But in the crevices of its great machine, small imperfections began to emerge. Zone 7, once forgotten among the endless registries of agricultural compliance, began reporting anomalous efficiency increases. Not fast, just enough to avoid suspicion. Worker morale, noted as unexpectedly stable, drew the attention of minor analysts in the Ministry of Labour Preservation, but no inquiries were made. The assembly believed only in deviation and order, not quiet harmony. Inside the silo, under the rust and damp, the writings grew. New pieces of flattened tin were added, stolen from decommissioned parts. On each one, written in charcoal or scratched in metal, were words not sanctioned by the collective. Not just the 8 policies now, but thoughts, arguments, dialogues, dreams. They recreated, bit by bit, the debates of the old Labour Congresses, the visions of syndicalist independence, and the testimonies of those long erased from the sanctioned memory of the party. Bray grew old there. His beard turned grey. His fingers cracked from handling metal and rust, but his eyes remained clear. He never spoke aloud of the circle. He never named the movement. But those who had seen the silo no longer walked with the dull posture of resignation. They straightened, ever so slightly. Their words became thoughtful. Their questions more daring. A young woman named Nella arrived in the 5th year of Bray's exile. She was assigned to irrigation oversight and quickly noted how little actual guidance came from the Bureau. She found Bray in the storage depot one day and asked him, with measured tone, if he believed the assembly would ever hold elections again. Bray looked at her and said, "Only when we stop asking and start deciding." She understood. 2 days later, she visited the silo. She stayed longer than most. Within weeks, new slogans appeared in chalk on the backs of water tanks: "The circle grows," "Labour without masters," and simply, 8. It was not an uprising. There were no weapons. No loud declarations. Only silence that pulsed with meaning. Like roots beneath frozen earth. The Bright Vanguard, the youth extension of the assembly, sent a delegate to investigate the sudden shifts in morale. He arrived in black uniform, with polished boots and a face too smooth to know the feel of calluses. He asked questions. He listened to workers. He saw nothing but well-organized output. When he asked Bray what inspired such compliance, Bray answered, "We believe in work." The delegate returned to the capital satisfied. His report included the phrase, "Model Zone," exemplary in ideological and productive discipline. The assembly raised quotas for Zone 7. The workers met them. In time, other zones began to shift. They had no silo, but they had travelers, whisperers. Each carried fragments of the forgotten text, phrases written from memory, etched into tool handles, muttered between shift changes. The 8 policies were resurrected like holy scripture. The living wage. The end of wage slavery. Banking for the people. Power to the federated councils. Food for need, not for gain. Transport for the worker. Land for the tiller. Control without hierarchy. The assembly remained blind. Years passed. One day, Bray did not rise for his shift. His body was found in his quarters, seated upright, hands resting on a battered notebook made from salvaged shipping parchment. There were no signs of violence. He had simply stopped. They buried him in the hills outside the zone, in soil once tilled by hand before the machines arrived. The assembly permitted a ceremony, standard, approved, brief. But that night, beneath the moonless sky, the workers of Zone 7 gathered in the field. They did not speak. They dug into the earth by hand and laid a new panel of tin beside his grave. It read, "He remembered. So we remember. The circle shall not break." And they sang. Not the songs of the assembly, but a song with no melody, only rhythm. A chant older than any of them, older than the party, older than even the old councils. By labor, by love, by the strength of our hands. The next morning, quotas were met. Reports were filed. Screens blinked. Nothing changed. And everything had changed. From the frost-blighted zones in the north, to the copper refineries in the east, the whispers moved. There were no leaders, no names, only ideas. The forbidden kind. The kind that could not be erased with a file or a tribunal. In the silence of the silo, the writings remained. Layer upon layer. Written in hand. Not copied, but lived. Syndicalism had not died. It had gone to ground. It had waited. It had grown. And somewhere, deep in the assembly's vaults, buried beneath forgotten flags and erased names, an old phrase still lingered in a corrupted archive line. Socialism, in our time. The circle, once broken, had begun to mend.